Hello, everybody. Welcome back. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. We are now in the afternoon session of this webinar, and in particular, we can see on the screen. I am Flavia De Luca. I will be chairing the afternoon session, and we can see on the screen the presentation from Professor Dilanti Amaratunga. She's part of the Global Disaster Resilience Center at the University of Huddersfield in the UK. I can see that we are at 1:15 sharp. As we did for the morning, the timing for allocated to each presentation is 15 minutes. It would be good to use 12 minutes only and have 3 minutes of questions to have the opportunity to ask questions. We also keep our Padlet open, so we will post again the link of our Padlet. So we hope that you will be very active in posting comments on the Padlet. Let me provide just a bit of the introduction to Professor Amaratunga. She is a professor of disaster risk management at the University of Huddersfield, an international renowned leading expert in disaster resilience with over 30 years of experience in the higher education sector. And currently she heads the Global Disaster Resilience Center at the University of Huddersfield. The floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much, Flavia. Thank you very much. So I will try to stick to the time, and the topic that I have been asked to talk today is about the challenges and approaches to disaster risk reduction in the global South. So as we all know, disaster risk reduction is everybody's business, which is actually the topic of this very important seminar. But however, I think it is now is the time to move from commitment to action on DRR with effective coordination mechanisms within and across sectors. However, as you can see from these slides, there are in the recent past more diverse natural hazards phenomena. For example, this is actually again from Global South in Indonesia. There are non-tectonic tsunamis, liquidation, and also tropical cyclones. So there are sort of more diverse reasons behind natural hazards. But of course, you know, we can't actually forget about what we all are facing at the moment, the COVID-19. Of course, we need to remember that disasters do not stop for a virus. So in that sense, we need to remember that the hazard landscape will be compounded by the threat of COVID-19 pandemic. While improvements have been made in terms of early warnings, disaster preparedness and response, which have led to reduction in loss of life in single hazard scenarios, it is also very clear to us that the increasing systemic nature of disaster risk, as I have highlighted in this slide, with the overlap of events and the interplay between risk drivers such as poverty, climate change, air pollution, growth in hazard exposed areas, and uncontrolled urbanization, and the loss of biodiversity requires greater strengthening of disaster risk governance. So what does this mean? The health crisis actually stressed our ability to cooperate, learn, and adapt in the face of deep uncertainties and rising risk. So since the beginning of COVID-19 pandemic, climate-related disasters have affected the lives of at least 139.2 million people across the globe and killed more than 17,242. And also it is further estimated that 658 million vulnerable people have been exposed to extreme temperatures. So in my view, this highlights the need of addressing both crises simultaneously, as the COVID-19 pandemic has affected livelihoods across the world and has made communities more vulnerable to climate risk. But there are challenges. What are they? The first one that I want to highlight is a lack of capacity. Several countries identify their lack of progress to a lack of necessary technical, financial, and human resources, inadequate institutional mechanisms, and so on and so forth. So this is actually one of the major challenges that we all face. And also the cross-linking to other policy agendas. Again, I haven't got the time to go into a lot of details, but as we all know, there are three global global policies that we all need to be adhering to: the Climate Change Agreement, the Sendai Framework, and also the Sustainable Development Goals. So in that sense, there is a need for stronger cross-linking to other policy agendas, such as what I just described. And also the financing. Finances is a major challenge. Public and private investment in disaster risk prevention and reduction through structural and non-structural measures need to be stepped up to create disaster resilient society. So this is actually one of the core challenges that we identified through our research. And also challenges associated with progressing multi-hazard approaches. Again, getting back to what I identified before in terms of dealing with compound hazards is extremely important. So in that sense, there need to be concentration on not on a single hazard disaster type, but of course this compound nature. So however, COVID-19 demonstrates the need for this particular approach, looking into multi-hazard in a systemic way, and also in this very globalized and interconnected world. So this is once again a very important challenge that needs addressing. And then issues associated with the academic and the policy interface. For example, in the global south, policymakers and practitioners appear to reach out to academics less than in many other countries. I think it is fair to say so. While there are many established bridges between academia and the policy community, such a culture of professional exchange appears is not so apparent particularly in the global south. So these are actually again some of the core challenges that I want to highlight. But what are the opportunities in terms of sort of getting rid of these challenges? So I want to highlight within the time that I have opportunities are categorized under 5 areas, as you can see in this slide. The first one is the need to link research, education, and action. And the second one is to integrate all hazards, stakeholders, and disciplines. And the third opportunity that I see is around collaborate regionally and globally. And the fourth one that I want to emphasize is the need to facilitate policy dialogues, knowledge sharing, and capacity development. And also the fifth one is the need to have flexible and customizable education programs. So again, very briefly, I will take you through some of the points. So if I sort of take the first one, which is actually linking research, education, and action. So again, what we need to do is to create an environment where the policies are built around best available knowledge, and also the policy gap needs to be closed with research that can be translated to action. And also there need to be mechanisms to communicate actionable knowledge. Again, these are very, very high level policy points that I want to highlight based on that, depending on the time that is available to me. And the second point that I want to emphasize is the need to integrate all hazard stakeholders and the disciplines. Again, I emphasized some examples before, this compound nature of disasters that we all face today within the backdrop of COVID and also natural and other types of hazards. So in that sense, there need to be a multidisciplinary approach, and also within the context of multi-stakeholders. In doing so, we need to address problems from the field and in calibrating solutions. So this is actually the second point that I would like to highlight. And the third one is actually to need to have collaboration regionally and globally. For example, of course, there's a high degree of collaboration between regions. Of course, you know, this webinar, of course, demonstrates that as a live example, but we all need to continue with this approach in terms of initiating collaboration between regions and nationally and locally. And also in that sense, the role of the international cooperation in this global partnership creation is really important. And also in that sense, this type of collaborations actually provide very important coordination mechanisms for science, in my view. So if you sort of move on to the fourth category, that is actually to need to facilitate policy dialogue, knowledge sharing, and capacity development. So I'm actually proposing that we can actually do that under 4 areas. The first one is to have greater priority on sharing and disseminating scientific information. And the second one is, of course, to have open access as a priority so that we all can share latest research without any boundaries across the globe. And also the fourth one is actually to have the understanding of language of the policymakers. This is extremely important because sometimes there can be miscommunication between academia, the researchers, and the policymakers. So in that sense, getting a very good understanding about the language of policymakers is extremely important. And also the fourth one that I want to emphasize is an aggregate of knowledge to improve access and focus on quality. That also actually linked with development of common language. So the fifth one that I want to emphasize is actually the need to develop flexible and customizable education programs. For example, if you take the DRR field, it is actually an expanding field, but in my view, it lacks young professionals. So in that sense, there need to be actually a lot of publicity and the need to develop flexible and customizable education programs. And also sort of perhaps maybe it is fair to say that programs do exist, but perhaps that they don't meet the employer needs. So we really need to actually do that checking between employer needs, the supply and the demand. And also this availability of these programs actually vary greatly across countries. For example, maybe it is due to the immaturity of the discipline and must better understand market needs. So in that sense, there need to be a balance between what is available with what is on offer. In that sense, I suppose there's a need to develop flexible and customized programs and curricula that actually promote the multidisciplinary approaches and also which actually provide appropriate balance between theory and field experiences, particularly in disaster risk reduction. This is extremely important. And also it should draw upon from the state of the art. This is extremely important once again in terms of communicating most up-to-date information with the practice and policy. In that sense, there's a need to develop a two-way knowledge transfer process. So these are some of the opportunities that I want to put forward to you in terms of promoting or overcoming, promoting DRR and overcoming associated challenges. So just to sort of conclude my short intervention, I want to acknowledge 4 of the projects from which that I have drawn upon some of these discussion points, which we actually do with countries in the Global South. Thank you very much for listening. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the presentation. It was very, very valuable. We will see if we have any question in the chat. In the meantime, can I ask you to address a point that I found very interesting from your presentation? You mentioned that at some point that is important within the Sustainable Development Goal to look at their how they are interrelated. In your experience, since you have a very vast experience in disaster risk reduction, in projects and so on, what are those that you have seen more correlated, that are occurring more frequently together?
I think it is a very, very valuable question, actually, Flavia. I think in a lot of sort of I see that there's correlation, particularly in the countries that I'm working with, between climate change and disasters. So I can actually sort of see a lot of correlation. But again, if you take the Sustainable Development Agenda into that equation, there are actually sort of gaps there, in the sense because sustainable development strategies are very much taking place at the national level, whereas the intersections between climate change and the disasters actually take place perhaps at the local level. So there are actually gaps in integrating these approaches into national policy planning. So in that sense, I suppose, in a nutshell, yes, the climate change and disasters are increasingly linked, but how it is directly mapped with sustainable development goals needs a little bit more attention.
Thank you very much. I can see that Tassos has just posted the question in the chat. I don't know, Tassos, if you want to unmute yourself and ask it yourself.
You read it, Flavia, just to follow the procedures. Thank you.
Okay, so we have, so the question from Tassos was about what are, in your opinion, the main challenges in engaging with the local stakeholders, and whether you have experienced the differences among the various countries in the Global South. In the meantime, while Dilanti address the last question, I would like to start double checking that our next speaker can share the screen. Francis Nkoka. Hi, Francis, can you share the screen? Hi, Dilanti, I was just waiting for a response on Tassos' question. If you, a very brief one, or you can address it in the chat. Okay. I can see in the meantime, okay, fantastic. The Dilanti is addressing the question in the chat, and I can see that Francis has shared his screen.